What are we doing? Armored Core 6?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're doing Armored Core 6. I wasn't planning on making this video until I found myself drowning in clips and no one to share them with. So for archiving purposes of this pre- and post-patch era, I will now talk at you about Armored Core 6. I stayed mostly away from duels because, as I've stated before, you have no obligation to duel in a game that isn't designed for it. But after this patch, it might just be. Might. Time will tell, and probably tell the opposite of what I'm telling you now. Let's begin with the exigence and work backwards. So why should we care with Armored Core PvP? It offers no rewards, neither tangible in-game nor intangible, like a running score, not even a pathetic pile of ranking points for you to gamble away against other players. You'll need to get through a good chunk of the story to even unlock it, and definitely won't have the best parts for a viable build by that time either. Not until you've completed the log hunt and all of the missions and found all of the secret parts. The level of combat depth is also dubious. Lobbies are irritating to work with, and the lack of quick play feature is sorely felt. And yet, dear listener, why do I still love it so much? I don't love it as much as invading, or street fighting, or super smashing bros, but it has a certain appeal. The kindest way I can describe the 3v3 environment is mecha mosh pit, or less charitably, robot orgy. A lot of your success will boil down to how good your team's collective building ability is, choosing the best parts always, and also your ability to focus fire on a single target, one after another, until whatever preset timer you've decided upon runs out. So what is there here that's so special? I think we're kind of ignoring the obvious here in that it's quite different from other player versus player games on the market. No other game currently available that's multiplayer based that I can think of really sells this mecha fantasy. The flying and maneuvering and shooting at your optimal range, and your own ability to design intricately each part and stat of your armored core, and then piloting it to those specifications. More than half of the game exists in the garage. Your ability to tinker and imagine and execute an engineering idea will dictate your enjoyment of not only the PvP, but the PvE as well. I was going to say that the depth of customization has been decreased from the 4th generation. The decision to homogenize turn speed is the only thing that really comes to mind at the moment. And yes, despite everyone trying to downplay it, the inclusion of a hard lock has changed things for better and for worse. Lowering the skill ceiling and the skill floor is not usually something I'd advocate for, but in this instance I understand why, at least. It makes the entire game a lot more mechanically approachable, and it helps players using a controller and not a keyboard and mouse. The only time I activate the hard lock is when I'm trying to go for a kick or a specific melee attack, or I accidentally trigger it, which happens a lot, as you will see. I very rarely want it because there is like a penalty for your accuracy with it, but it does come up. I will say that the launch patch is a completely different experience to what the current patch is like, at least in terms of the player versus player combat, and mostly teams. The 1v1s didn't interest me very much, especially not in the prior meta. Dueling was exceedingly one-dimensional, regardless of your choice of optimal build, be it Missile Boat, or Zimmerman's, or whatever it was you were using. The team game format had enough chaos so that it could be fun and engaging, while also challenging your expectations. Would I have loved to invade or be invaded during missions? Absolutely, especially if I had the option to get back repair kits after beating the invader. Although the builds of the release patch may have been a bit too much for that sort of thing, and the game was not wholly balanced around something like that working. Overall, my only true criticism is that a quick play mode for 1v1 or 3v3 that bypasses the lobby system would be best, something to put players together from a queue. Other modes would be nice too, like a 2v2 option or a capture the flag, king of the hill, or even like a point capture maybe. Something to structure the space of a team fight that isn't just an entire map. Some interesting limitations and goals, aside from destroy the enemy ACs fastly and goodly. I could even see like a ranked 3v3 mode working with, skill-based matchmaking, but these aren't really solutions. Without further delay, I'll now do the interesting part of the video, my builds. I've said it once and I'll say it again, I love a lightweight assembly. Configuring armored core parts for speed was not the wisest move in the first patch, but as of late, it appears to be a lot more viable. So most of my builds in the first patch were some form of lightweight, based on this model that I used to beat basically every boss encounter in the game. I eventually switched over to the laser dagger, but I was using this laser blade as well. The idea was to make something that could handle any mission, any boss, and PvP in somewhat equal measure, and it turns out that when you do that, you make a build that's pretty good for PvE, but pretty bad for PvP. I mean, lightweights getting staggered by stray missiles was also part of the problem, and also my reluctance to use the really, really broken stuff altogether, which would have helped me, I'm sure. I was also very reluctant to use 2 of any weapon, and also to try and diversify my weapon types to have a different type in each slot. I don't really know why I wanted to do that. It just felt like the most well-balanced thing to do to give me an option for a variety of situations. It never actually ended up working like that, because that's just not how the meta of this game works. And in fairness, it's not really how the meta of any game works. For Armored Core 6 specifically, you are looking for a fast stagger combo with whatever weapons you're using to accomplish it, and then you need a weapon or weapons on hand to punish that stagger as hard as possible. The highest risk version of this is a melee build, and for that risk you don't have to worry about ever running out of ammo for your punish, but it's not as if that would ever happen in the first place. Unless you're in a 10-minute game and you never die. Maybe. But that's exceedingly unlikely. First of all, who wants to be in a team game for 10 minutes? I don't understand why you'd ever make a lobby for that. I feel like 5 minutes is the limit, 7 minutes is pushing it, and 10 minutes is ridiculous. So anyway, I tried to make a bunch of builds based on this faulty philosophy that ultimately made me lose a lot, and I was really bad at the game, and I refused to improve my experience by just using better weapons, or like looking up someone else's build because I was too proud to do that. So a lot of my first patch experience is any bad time I had from losing, specifically, is my own fault. And I always blame myself for doing badly in a game because I'm the only one responsible for my experience and I can tailor it to be whatever way I want. And even doing shittily with my lightweights, I enjoyed my time immensely. My lightweight obsession got so extreme that I started just stripping parts off that were absolutely necessary to play well, and I just got down to a laser dagger and a Sweet 16 shotgun. And let me tell you, it did work. It had a game plan. It was technically an armored core that functioned. This was extremely early as well. I should mention that this is not the best way to do this. There is definitely a far more optimal way to do it in the present patch. And even before then, I could have used a Zimmerman on this instead. But I was determined to have as little weight as possible, and the Zimmerman was very heavy. So I was using a Sweet 16, and all I had to do was land a fully charged laser dagger attack into a Sweet 16 shot at point-blank range, because it's one of the few guns that will not miss at point-blank range, and it will stagger just about any bipedal or reverse joint. Tetrapods and tanks is going to take me a couple passes to stagger them, even still. So anyway, you do your stagger combo, and then once you stagger, the laser dagger has come off cooldown because it cools down very fast, and then you just do the triple swipes at them, and that does like half their health or whatever. Not the best, but functional. I don't think I'm ever going to revisit this because it is extremely stressful to try to use, even within the confines of the builds that I like to use, which are usually more input intensive. I just found that landing the laser dagger charge attack was basically impossible against a sufficiently mobile opponent. It doesn't have very good vertical tracking, and the hitbox is not as big as like the pulse blades, so not even really worth it. Fun though, very fun. So after I more or less got over the laser blades, I moved on to just bullets, just lots of bullets. This is 2 handguns and the Huxley Orbiter, which gives me basically 3 continuous fire sources for a very fast stagger at close range, and then I can switch to the laser dagger to do the punish combo I was doing earlier. In this instance, I'm using the pulse blade, which is technically better, and I would recommend using that over the laser dagger. However, I mean, you could make a statement for the laser dagger. Since I'm not usually using the pulse blade to do the staggering on this build, I can rest easy knowing that the long cooldown will never really affect me, because I'm only using it for this punish. This is all on the previous patch, by the way. The ducats recently got a small buff, but it doesn't really impact the way this build works at all. This would still be more or less functional, and you can make it better by using like a pile bunker instead, or like a much higher damage punish option than the pulse blade. I just find the pulse blade to be very consistent and useful in case you need it in a pinch. I have many more builds than I'm going to show here, but I'm just going to kind of hit you with the highlights of the builds that actually got clips from PvP, because some of them were just very poor. There were a lot of failed attempts to get to the successful attempts, and most of it was not even my building ability. A lot of it comes down to the roll of the dice for which teammates you're going to get, and it's up to you to try to carry it. At some point I decided that there weren't enough chainsaw builds, and there definitely still aren't, so I took it upon myself to make one. This isn't like anything particularly special. The best thing about it is probably the songbird on its back, and that I was using, if you remember, on the very first build that I was PvPing with, because it's good, and it's probably still great. It's just not as strong as it once was. That place has been taken by the earshot, which I'll show you at the end of the video. But anyway, the idea behind this is to apply sustained pressure with vertical missiles, close range shots with the Haldeman, and then finish them off with a chainsaw charged attack while I'm up close. Much easier said than done. The grab box on the chainsaw is not super consistent. You do have to be charging it for at least like a second or two before you let it rip. But you can charge it while firing your right-hand weapon, which is kind of what I do. I get people into range of being staggered with the shotgun using the missiles and the songbird, and then I just stagger them with the shotgun, and then immediately go into the chainsaw attack. You could do something similar with any number of right-handed weapons that would be better than the Haldeman. But I liked the extremely fast reload of the Haldeman, so that's why I was using it. Eventually I did manage to somewhat perfect the lightweight assembly by using a Viento needle gun, or an off-handed machine gun of some kind, combined with a shotgun, or 2 shotguns in this instance. I switched between the Haldeman and the Sweet 16, and I use that to get in close, do my stagger, and then I switch to the pulse blade for the punish, which does a fabulous amount of damage. Now, was the guy with the coral missiles helping me out here? Absolutely. But I reiterate, that is the luck of the draw. And finally, I will move on to what I think I consider to be my favorite builds, now probably just because they're effective. The laser builds, which I sort of put together on stream a little bit last week, and I eventually refined it off stream. Here is an early version of that with a reverse joint. Here I combine plasma missiles and the laser drones to kind of average results. And then here I take out the best generator for laser weapons. I get some of the most damaging laser weapons on, and I give myself some missiles to accelerate the staggering process. And then once they're staggered, I just unload the laser rifles onto them. And it does so much damage. I definitely think that these are one of the better weapons at this point in time, in the current state of things. I've got what I think is a very solid mid-range firing control system at the moment. I don't think I fully dedicated to close range on this one because we wanted to play keep away a little more. The trick to this one is really using your vertical mobility to dodge as much as possible and fake out the enemy's fire control system to the best of your ability, and then also making sure that you don't overheat your laser guns if possible, which requires a level of trigger discipline that I was not expecting. I admit a lot of this combat looks the same to me when I'm watching it, so if it looks the same to you, you're not alone, because it kind of is. This is nothing against the game itself, but I will say you're not encountering very many different situations. All combat encounters are 1v1 or 3v3, and that comes with all of the burdens of either of those modes. There's no healing, there's very little in the way of like damage mitigation, and if you know what you're doing, the time to kill can be so incredibly low. You get staggered and die most of the time. And this whole stagger equals death thing really comes into play in a team game. Not that you can't do it in a 1v1, because you definitely can kill people off of a single stagger in a duel, not even counting chip damage. But lightweights were especially difficult in a team environment, because in order to survive, you basically just had to like bounce from enemy to enemy. You're doing hit and run tactics. And your ability to maneuver around the battlefield lets you capitalize on openings that your teammates might be creating a lot sooner. Being able to actually communicate that to them is not going to work unless you're in a lobby, but if you are in a lobby with someone, then all the more reason to do so. Which is why I feel like this would be a lot better if you were like in a ranked game on comms, which has its own baggage, you know, if you're not playing with friends and you're playing with random mech enthusiasts from the internet. And I have played some with friends, and it's been an excellent time. It would have been a lot better if I had good builds at the time of us playing, but I will probably play more with my friends in the future. I think I came to really love this particular build, I guess just because after so much time of forcing myself to use these anemic lightweights, I eventually managed to put something together that worked. And in fairness, I didn't even like come up with this idea myself. I stole most of the weapon choice from another player that was dominating a lobby I was in, and I simply looked at their AC and I went, I could make that better. So I took their weapon choice and I like messed with all of the internals, I tweaked the actual body of the armored core, and I got it so that we could use that beautiful generator that gives you 150% of an energy weapon's capacity. It was nice to just win for once. And in the utter absence of Zimmermans, in the absence of coral missiles, and in the absence of stun needles. So I give this patch a 10 out of 10. It's really one of the better patches that From Software has done, I must say. Very, very little to complain about here, aside from the earshots, and that's just like a growing pain. And now, to end this video properly, I will leave you with the full clip of the most disgusting thing I have created since the patch dropped. Feel free to steal it. Feel free to do whatever you want with it. It's not like I have to protect new players in Armored Core. I should also mention that it's probably not optimal and there's like a better way to do it. I should also mention that I'm not the best pilot at it and I'm kind of just spamming. Do with this information what you will, Raven. Fly safe.